Hi everyone. One of the bishops of one of King Arthur's three main courts, according to the Welsh triads, was a certain Bishop Bedwini. Now he's very interesting because he's so elusive. You see, the other two bishops, the chief bishops of the other two courts, were David and Kentigern. Both of them are famous in their own right. There are plenty of records about them. But Bishop Bedwini seems to be impossible to find in the records, aside from this role as one of Arthur's chief bishops. So I thought, well, since I believe that King Arthur was the historical Athrois son of Myrig, I thought, well, why don't I try to find him in the church records about the land grants involved in Athrois' dynasty? Because there are many records, all from the Book of Llandaff, about Athrois and his family giving donations of land to the church, and these donations, the records of these donations, are accompanied by witness lists of important people from the church. So I thought, well, why don't I see if I can find him there? So I had a look, and I believe that I have found him. So he appears as a certain Bithen. If you were to see his name, you would pronounce it Bithen. B-I-T-H-E-N. Now he appears not as the main bishop who was overseeing the land grant in question, but he is described as the prince of a place which I'll pronounce Llandaff. I'm not sure if that's how you're supposed to pronounce it, but I know that it's identified by modern scholars as modern Daward, which is in southern Herefordshire, just next to the border of Gwent. So he's described as the prince of that place. So even though he's not presented as the main bishop overseeing the land grant, he is presented as being someone of very high status. Now he is placed on the clergy side, not the laity. So he wasn't just a prince in the sense of the son of a king. He was a prince or princeps, which is the Latin word that's used, of this religious community in Daward. So evidently he was someone of a very high status, a religious figure of a very high status in southern Herefordshire, just next to the border of Gwent. Now the land grant in question, it doesn't include Athrois there, but it includes some of his contemporaries. So he was definitely a contemporary of Athrois. So if Athrois was King Arthur, then this person could have been Bedwini. But what about the name? So I pronounced it Bithen, but could this really be another version of Bedwini? Well, you might think, no, the names are too dissimilar. But consider this for a moment. So there are a number of examples of names where you have a D or T followed by a W, where in other spellings, in other manuscripts, you find the same name spelt with a T-H. One example is Tathol. So Tathol appears in some other records as Tudwal. So the names are very similar. It's T, vowel, and then another T or D, which are often swapped in different manuscripts. But then in one spelling, you have an H after the T, making ostensibly a th sound. However, in the other spelling, in other manuscripts, we find a W there in the place of the H, and then it's followed by another vowel and then a W. So in one case it's Tudwal, in the other case it's Tathol, or perhaps Tathal. In any case, we see the H has been exchanged for a W, or vice versa. And there are other examples of this as well. So the point is, where we find Bithen, or perhaps Bithen, perhaps in another spelling, or in another manuscript, that might be spelt Bitwen, with a W in the place of the H. Now regarding Bedwini, we know from the manuscript evidence that his name was sometimes spelt B-I-T instead of B-E-D, and every variation in between for that matter. And also sometimes his name was spelt without the final I. So rather than Bedwini, sometimes his name was spelt Bedwin. So when we consider the variations that we see of his name in the records, like Bitwini and Betwin, and we compare that with Bithen, where the H may well have been exchanged for a W in some other records, that would make Bitwen. They are virtually the same name. Now, given that he's described as a prince of his territory, his religious community, he was evidently someone of very high status at that time. Now, interestingly, Dawud is just 10 miles away, just half a day's walking distance from Llanfeddern, which happens to have been recorded in medieval manuscripts as Gelliwig. Now, isn't that interesting? See, I believe that Llanfeddern was the Gelliwig of the Arthurian legends. Now, as it happens, Bishop Bedwini was the chief bishop of Arthur's court at Gelliwig. So isn't it interesting that this historical religious figure, Bithen, is described as the prince of Dawud, just 10 miles away from Llanfeddern. Now, to add even further support for this, when you look at Llanfeddern and Dawud, just next to each other on the map, and you look directly south to the coast, what do you find? Bedwin Sands. Bedwin, exactly the form of Bedwini's name as he's sometimes seen, like in the Dream of Rhonabwy. So we find precisely the name of the bishop on the coast just south of the very place that the historical Bithen was associated with. And as I've just explained, I think a very good case can be made that Bithen is just another form of the name Bedwini because of the exchange between the H and the W. You've got Bitwen and you've got Bedwini, as Bedwini is sometimes called. So I believe that when this evidence is taken in conjunction with the connection with Bedwin Sands and the historical Gelliwig, just 10 miles to the west, I believe that a very strong case can be made that this historical figure, Bithen, who appears in the Llandaff charters as a contemporary of Athrois, I believe that he can be identified as the historical Bishop Bedwini.